This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. There's a little bit of a pre-autumn crisp in the air. It's not as hot as it has been. It's a little cool out. The leaves are falling. They're turning orange and brown and yellow and all types of fun colors, bit by bit. Fall is coming up upon us quite quickly. But what does that matter with anything? The world's burning down, as I'm told every day, so there you go. And who's joining me for whatever that soliloquy was on this beautiful Sunday morning? Matt Barnes, hello. Sarah Chapman, hello. Ken Elliott, hello. Ali, hello. Ryan R, hello. J2022, hello. Shadowclaw, hello. Brittany Holland, hello. Tall Person, hello. Mike Savage, Blarg. Good morning to you all. A2P, hello. Good morning. So it's been, I think, a month or two. I don't know. Time flies. Time is dilated. Since the last time I did a little Border Stories Roundup. Because as you may know, or may not know, at one time on my channel, I regularly did a entry into a series I called Expatriate Games, wherein I covered different stories about immigration or stories about deportations and things like that. And kind of fell by the wayside over time, but I've decided that once in a blue moon, which I guess is technically now, I will take a look at what's going on in the wonderful world of immigration policy, deportation stories, so on and so forth. And as you may know, in the last few days, some very dramatic stories in regards to immigration policy and deportations has occurred. And I will be getting to that. But I thought I'd start off with some other stories that I think might better contextualize where things are at in the general sense, rather than talking specifically about Ron DeSantis, which we will talk about, as I said. But I thought we'd start out with a couple others first. So that's what we're going to do today, some article reading and updating myself, because except for some of the broad strokes of recent events, I don't know what's all going on in the stories that I've selected. So there's my preamble there. Arc 210, Roasted Opinions, Resolute Germ, good morning. So I found this one a little funny the other day. This comes to us from the Washington Post on September 13th. Advocacy group says Fairfax is not doing enough to curb deportations. Fairfax, okay. A Fairfax County policy aimed at protecting undocumented immigrants from deportation is not being implemented aggressively enough, a coalition of immigrant advocacy groups said, although they also acknowledge that Fairfax has been more aggressive than other jurisdictions on the issue. Okay, so Fairfax County has apparently declared themselves effectively a sanctuary county, and that they will not assist the federal government in enforcing immigration policy. So keep that in mind. In January 2021, the county board adopted a trust policy that prohibits Fairfax employees, including police officers, from cooperating with federal immigration agents, a move meant to counter the fear that many undocumented immigrants have of dealing with government officials. As in, that many illegal immigrants have of facing the consequences of breaking federal law. All right, so Fairfax County has decided to take a no assistance position, sort of like how California has operated for a long time now. Among other things, the county's sheriff's office has stopped cooperating with U.S. Immigrations and Custom Enforcement requests to hold inmates wanted for deportation beyond their sentences. Okay, so if you know that someone in your custody is here in the country illegally, you will take no extra effort to withhold them from being released so that the federal government can deal with their deportation. Just let them go. Okay. As part of the policy, much of which was already in practice before it was formally adopted, county agencies also don't ask residents about immigration status before providing any services. Okay. But the rate of deportation cases that originate in Virginia's most populous jurisdiction is still higher than some large communities, at about 930 per 100,000 residents, according to a report by a coalition of immigrant advocacy groups in Northern Virginia using federal data compiled by Syracuse University's Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse. Wow. Okay, so you have an entire county that is taking no action, has a hands-off policy when it comes to doing anything to facilitate the deportation of anybody within its boundaries who's in the country illegally. Now, I'm not quite sure what more a county could do, right? Short of actively and intentionally aiding and abetting such crimes, which, not enforcing the law is kind of doing. But anyway, that's setting that aside. Separation of federal and local jurisdictions. These rates include cases from a variety of sources. Among them, ICE arrests in the community, cases where an undocumented immigrant is released from federal prison and enters the ICE orbit, cases that are transferred from another jurisdiction to Fairfax, and cases that are old and have not been resolved, the advocates say. I'll make my observation at the end of this. While it's hard to know whether the higher rate of cases in the county has anything to do with shortcomings in the trust policy, the advocates said, the group nonetheless argued that the county could be doing more to stem deportations. Okay, so, and I don't know what's going to happen next in the story. All right, so the county has ordered all of its employees, law enforcement, everybody, do not assist the federal government, do not assist ICE in any way, shape, or form with either, I'm assuming, investigating, but certainly not deporting anyone in the county who is in the country illegally. All right, what more does this advocacy group want the county to be doing? In a letter sent Monday to the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, the group, which includes the ACLU People Power Fairfax, Legal Aid Justice Center, and ACLU of Virginia, said that the county police department is still leaving undocumented immigrants susceptible to deportation by including too much information in its arrest reports, which go to a law enforcement database that federal immigration agents can mine for potential cases. Okay, so now they're asking the police to withhold pertinent information on otherwise legitimate arrests on the off chance that the feds might be able to glean something of the person's identity or status from it. Okay, they want to conceal information on criminals. Okay. The coalition also said the county has not yet begun accepting identification cards provided by nonprofits to undocumented immigrants, a provision of the trust policy geared toward individuals without another form of ID. Identification cards provided by nonprofits. My first question is, how legitimate and or official or vetted should a identification card provided by a nonprofit be taken by any official authority? You know, my library card is an identification from a nonprofit, but I don't think most people would accept that as a formal form of identification in any particular instance. Okay. Quote, if the board wishes to gain immigrants' trust, why would they? Particularly in the area of public safety, it must jumpstart implementation of the trust policy, the letter said. I thought they already had. I thought the trust policy was county employees, including law enforcement, do not assist the federal government. County officials said that no agency in Fairfax, including the police department, interacts with ICE. Okay. The county did not immediately have a response on whether it is accepting non-profit identification cards. Well, I would advise the county not to do so. I don't think that's a wise idea. I'm not quite sure what the logic is behind the advocacy group saying that it is a wise idea. Police reports offer some details about the person being arrested, but do not reveal exact addresses, County Executive Brian Hill said. Quote, "It's limited to the block. We don't put down the actual address," unquote, he said, adding that the county recently hired a director of immigration services whose job is to better coordinate how the trust policy is implemented. Okay, so I know this is just a hypothetical scenario here, but let's say you have someone who was arrested on a relatively minor charge, let's say. So like driving without a license, let's say, just as a hypothetical. And that's all the county level knows about this person, right? Because they're not doing anything to ask about status. They're not doing any investigation into the person's residency, nothing like that. Okay. And now they're actively making sure not to put down an exact address for this person. Okay. Well, what if this person happens to be guilty of more serious crimes in their home country? And that can be determined if and or the feds, do some research on this person. But then they can't find this person who is in the country illegally, but is also suspected and or is a convicted felon somewhere else for something serious. Whose responsibility is that? I know I'm just bringing up a scenario that is completely and totally could never happen, would never happen, but, what if? Marvel's what if. Just a little bit. Jeffrey C. McKay, D, as in Democrat, chairman of the Board of Supervisors, said the county takes the policy seriously because it wants all residents to be comfortable with county interactions, particularly in instances where solving a crime may depend on a witness who is undocumented. Quote, "If our residents do not trust the police, it undermines public safety for all county residents," McKay said. Well, how much trust in the police is there if you are willingly and intentionally letting criminals go and not punishing crimes just because they happen to be crimes you don't agree with for some reason? I mean, where does the trust begin and end with this? The immigrant advocates are demanding that the county police further conceal arrest data, do more to eliminate racial profiling by police, okay, and reduce the number of arrests for public drunkenness, which disproportionately affect communities of color. Okay, what does that last one have to do with? Okay, if they're not helping the feds enforce immigration policy, and, period, stop, full stop, that's the end, well then, what does the rest of this have to do with anything? If they're not going to ask anybody their status in the country, regardless of who they are, if they're mandated not to, well, then that entire demographic is effectively indemnified from that kind of investigation by the local authorities. But on top of that, they want to eliminate racial profiling and reduce the number of arrests for public drunkenness. Okay, one leads to the other, I guess. Why would an illegal immigrant have a criminal background? Only future doctors and physicists want to come to America, or so I've been told. I mean, coming to the country illegally, they haven't committed any crime. I heard this all the time. If you look back at my playlist for expatriate games, the line that was said probably more often than anything else is they'd be talking about some case of someone being in the country illegally, and they'd also describe this person as having committed no crimes, or having been convicted of no crimes, or whatever. Like, you understand that being in the country illegally is a crime, right? They always seem to leave that one out. They always seem to give that one a pass. Been in the country for 10 years, undocumented, but never committed any crimes. Like, anyway, that happened more than enough. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Let's see. What else here? And with about 7 deportation cases originating in Fairfax per day, the county should ensure that it is doing everything it can to protect undocumented immigrants, said Simon Sandoval Mosenberg, director of the Immigrant Advocacy Program for the Legal Aid Justice Center. Quote, "Even if it just goes down to 6, it's worth doing," he said. Okay, so Fairfax County, which has a blanket order to all county employees not to assist the federal government in their activities and deportations or investigations thereof, illegal immigrants, has a really, really high rate of arrests and deportations taking place. I wonder, and I mean, I'm just spitballing here. You know, I don't want to do the reporter's job for them or anything, or brainstorm some possibilities here. But I wonder if it might be worth asking if the most populous county in the state of Virginia has publicly declared they will not assist the federal government in their law enforcement responsibilities. I wonder if, I don't know, it's just a crazy idea. I wonder if the federal government then decided to put more resources and more of a focus on that jurisdiction, knowing that they were not going to be getting any help from the local authorities. I wonder, and I could be wrong. I'm being a little facetious here, but all the same, I could be wrong. But I just wonder if maybe there's not some compensation taking place to counter the lack of support from local authorities. Maybe that's why. So if you're asking your local authorities to not assist the federal government, and then you're surprised that the federal government is paying more attention to a jurisdiction that is effectively harboring criminals, maybe that's why. You might have gotten exactly what you asked for. However, there might also be other forces at work to take up the slack. Anyway, so that's story number 1 out of Fairfax County, Virginia. But let us move on, if I'm not off base here, to our vice president. Let's look at a story in regards to our vice president. Let's see if I can get rid of this thing here. No, go away. I don't want your little ad down here, but I'll scroll through it regardless. Yes, that's what I meant to do. You guys see that okay? I just want to make sure. I've screwed up the tabs before, and I'd be talking about an article, and the article won't actually be there, so. Vice President Kamala Harris under fire for saying the border is secure. This is also from September 13th. Let's see. Vice President Kamala Harris is being criticized for comments she recently made about border safety. Quote, "The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed," Harris told Chuck Todd during an interview of NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday, this past Sunday. Quote, "We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration," she added. We have a secure border, but a broken immigration system. Now, you may remember from my previous digest of border stories, the incredible increase in illegal crossings during the time of the Biden administration. The percentiles increase year over year. Hundreds of thousands of people within a couple of months' time, and more so. I think it was like 500,000 people in the first 3 months or something ridiculous. I'm sure we'll find out in one of these stories they'll cover it. Mark Morgan, an American law enforcement official who served as the Chief Operating Officer and Acting Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection from July 5th, 2019 to January 20th, 2021, said, quote, "It's absolutely a lie," unquote. He said it's frustrating to watch the Biden administration, quote, "dismantle," unquote, effective tools and policies to intentionally unsecure the border. Quote, "They took the most secure border in our lifetime and they unsecured it," unquote, Morgan told the National Desk during an interview on Tuesday morning. Quote, "We have this administration, now including the Vice President of the United States, lying to the American people," he added. In a separate interview, Morgan said the majority of fentanyl in the United States is coming from the southwest border. Quote, "Where do they get the chemicals and the products to manufacture fentanyl?" Morgan said. "It comes from China," unquote. Fentanyl overdose is the leading cause of death for U.S. adults 18 to 45 years old, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In July, Customs and Border Protection seized 1,800 pounds of the synthetic drug. The CDC reported that more than 107,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 2021. Quote, "You must secure the border, both in between the ports of entry and at the ports of entry, to cut off the supply. And part of that is stopping the flow of illegal immigration because those things are connected. As illegal immigration goes up, resources are pulled off the line, resulting in operational control of the border literally being handed over to the cartels where they're exploiting it and drugs are pouring into the country," said Morgan. Quote, "We need to shift our strategy to a whole government approach and commitment to go after the cartels equally as we do terrorist organizations throughout the world." Yes, Kamala Harris saying that the border is secure is nonsense next to the increases of illegal crossings that have taken place just within the term of her administration thus far. I mean, it's been going up more or less, bit by bit, year by year, but the increases over the last 2 years alone have been ridiculous. Let's see, John Gamesman, good morning. Funtime Bats, good morning. Vero of Ashmedai, good morning. Yeah, so there's story number 2. Let's move on to story number 3. A bit more. I've talked about this just about every time I've talked about border situations, and my overall primary gripe, concern, etc. is how many people are risking theirs and their children's lives to cross the border illegally, and how sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, all that kind of thing, the rhetoric from the Biden administration leads people to take those risks. If they can just get across the border into California, if they can just get across the border and up to Fairfax County, they'll be protected, they'll be safe. And in the process of, leveraging that desperation, thinking that they're doing people some good to have a sanctuary city or a sanctuary county or whatever else, more people end up killing themselves or taking their children with them. So consequently, Texas border town requests refrigerators to store bodies as migrant drownings increase. In Eagle Pass, Texas, officials said the town on the U.S.-Mexico border is overwhelmed, and they've had to make a grim request due to a surge in migrant drownings. The fire department has asked for refrigerators to store bodies, saying that mortuaries can't handle the sudden increase. Eagle Pass Fire Department Chief Manuel Mello III told Fox News he's never seen so many drownings. Excuse me. Quote, "There are so many bodies being recovered that the morticians are asking for assistance. We do a body recovery daily. It's very traumatic for my personnel. Those living and working near the southern border are pleading for additional help from the federal government. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is calling for change as well, but it's becoming more clear that there are growing gaps in what kinds of change officials said are needed. Texas Governor Greg Abbott continues to bus migrants nearly 2,000 miles north, making Washington, D.C., one of the latest cities to feel firsthand the brunt of what many call a crisis at the border." What many call? I think it's demonstrably obvious, but D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has said it's too much to handle, declaring a public emergency and asking the federal government to step in and, quote, "make sure that our systems are not broken by a crisis that is certainly not of our making," unquote. Chicago is the latest city to receive busloads of migrants. Now Philadelphia is preparing to become the next. Abbott continues pushing back at Democratic leaders and so-called sanctuary cities, as he said they need to understand the impact the migrant surge is having on border communities. The Biden administration said the issue is a broken system, but not a broken border. And Vice President Kamala Harris said fixing it is, quote, "a priority for any nation and our administration," unquote. Let's see. And this quote again from her and the Meet the Press interview: "The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed." Really? Okay. The 4 years previous. The border. Not a concern? Not something that was action was being taken on, whether you agree with it or not. Okay. But there's a different point of view coming from Eagle Pass, from which Full Measure's Cheryl Atkinson just returned. Quote, "It's clear they're fighting a war without the help they need from the federal government," Atkinson said as she investigated. She said she found government officials, law enforcement, and residents overwhelmed. Quote, "Right now they've still got places where they haven't finished the fence, and they've got gates that let them through. I've never seen anything like this, and I've been here all my life," unquote, Texas rancher Jim Hobbs told Atkinson. Hobbs said he attributes it to the Biden administration. The Biden administration says it continues to focus on root causes of mass migration, including countries where violence, corruption, and devastated economies are driving people to leave their homes. U.S. laws do allow for them to make claims for asylum in this country. Yes, we have laws that allow someone to apply for asylum in this country. That is a legal process. That is a legitimate way in which to come to live in this country. That's not what the problem is. Quote, "When individuals arrive in the United States and make a claim of fear of persecution by reason of their membership in a particular social group, they are able to make a claim of asylum in immigration court," unquote, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said. Yes, that's true. And there are so many people showing up to claim asylum, which is a legal process, that the entire process is backed up. Because there's not enough courts, there's not enough judges. Each one of those claims has to be investigated, looked into, verified, etc. And at the same time, though, you would probably not be surprised at how many stories I've covered over the years where someone has gone through that process, either immediately upon arriving at the border or applying retroactively after having been in the country illegally for several years, having that case investigated for legitimacy, having that case found to be without grounding, without foundation, and then ordered to be deported, and then that becomes a scandal. You know, even after they went through the process, because here's the thing, an application for asylum is not a guarantee of residency. You are asking the federal government to verify your claim, and it has to fall within some very specific criteria. But still, all of these things have to be, by law, investigated and processed in immigration courts. And there's only so much bandwidth to process that, so the whole system's backed up. So to say that we have a broken immigration system or an overwhelmed immigration system is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. None of that is helped by sanctuary cities or lax policy or rhetoric coming out of the government saying that, you know, a soft hand is going to be taken to people that come across the border. Or that there will be no consequences. Still, with more migrants coming, the claims are piling up in an immigration court system that is backing up, and the country contends with a divided Congress that, for now, doesn't appear to have immigration reform on its agenda. Well, that might be changing. Now, this story was published on the 13th again. Yes, so September 13th was the magical day that I was getting stories, apparently. Until, well, let's get into the big stuff. But first, a little context. Because some of this is not being, as far as I can tell, and again, I haven't watched every newscast, but for the sake of my own broadcast, let's get a little context on what's happening with Florida and Ron DeSantis. So this is a story from November 17th of 2021. Okay? So this is almost a year old now. But it is important in contextualizing what's taking place right now with Florida and Martha's Vineyard. DeSantis claims Biden running clandestine flights to send migrants to Florida, but the routine transport also occurred under Trump. I love how CNN framed this. I don't know if we covered this story in Lords of the Night or anything. Heck, I think we might have been done with Lords of the Night by then. Either way, I love this because he claims he's running clandestine flights, but these things also took place under Trump. Well, then his claim isn't a claim. It's just he's pointing out something that is happening, right? Okay. And so it happened under Trump? Does that make it okay? then. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis accused the Biden administration last week of secretly flying migrants from the U.S.-Mexico border to his state in the dead of night without notice. But sources tell CNN the Biden administration did brief the Florida governor's office about the flights and that similar transports occurred during the Trump era. Sources tell CNN. What were your sources? I mean, do you have confirmation of that? I know I'm critiquing an article from a year ago, but this is CNN. So why not? Quote, here's what happens with these flights. There's no notification to the state of Florida. These are done mostly in the middle of the night, and it's clandestine, unquote, DeSantis, a Republican, said at a news conference. The state has filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration over the release of migrants, and for the potential 2024 GOP presidential candidate, the flights represent a grievance close to home on an issue that resonates with his base of support. Documents obtained by CNN show that many of the flights arriving in Jacksonville over the past 6 months came during the daytime, while at least 15 arrived overnight. Wait. So many of the flights came during daytime, but you say specifically 15 happened overnight. Well, how many is many? I mean, is it 15 versus 4? Or 15 versus 30? Why do you have an exact number for the one but not for the other? Sources told CNN the late-night arrivals were due to travel logistics, including the length of the flights from Texas and other stops they had to make on their way. What sources? Who are your sources? Sources told. There's absolutely no reason for anonymity here. We have, as a reader, I have to be able to judge the credibility of the information. And then this isn't some, whistleblower situation where anonymity could make some sense. Sources told. Okay. The Department of Health and Human Services schedules such flights for underage immigrants detained at the border with Mexico, transporting them to special children's shelters or to meet sponsors around the country. In a November letter to Biden, 5 Republican congressmen from Florida echoed similar concerns, writing, quote, the flights that your administration facilitated in the dead of the night is to secretly transport illegal immigrants is indefensible and another failed attempt to diminish, which is misspelled, the severity of the border crisis. And that is a notated misspelling, not CNN's fault. Granted that they're, repeating that verbatim. Okay, so the Biden administration, just to verify, is using planes to transport children from one state to another. Okay, government, chartered flights transporting children from one state to another. I just want to make sure we all remember that bit of the story. Okay. But sources told CNN, what sources? That the Republicans are attacking the Biden administration over a routine practice and that flights transferring migrants, including unaccompanied children, have occurred during multiple administrations, including that of former President Donald Trump, according to current and former officials. Okay, such as? I mean, when? How many? Who are your officials? Who's saying this? The Florida Department of Law Enforcement provided a list revealing more than 70 flights believed to be organized by the federal government to transport migrants to Jacksonville between late April and early October. Okay, of 2021, I'm assuming, since this article was 2021. So 70 flights. Okay, but only 15 were, what was it again? The past 6 months came during time. Well, at least 15 arrived overnight. At least 15, okay. Most of the listed flights fall under the Health and Human Services Department, which is charged with the care of migrant children. Okay. Oh, here we go. Finally. So why didn't you say this at the beginning? Of the 47 flights that CNN was able to confirm through charter flight logs from the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, only 15 landed in Jacksonville between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The charter logs did not have information for 30 other flights included on that list. Okay, so wait. So you're only able to verify out of 47 that 15 landed within, as they would say, maybe the middle of the night. But the other 30 did not have information you could say one way or the other. And yet you did say that many flights landed during daytime. So, okay, 15 plus 30 is 45. You said there's 47. Were there only 2 flights that landed during the daytime that you can confirm? I'm an English major, not a math major, so if I'm missing something here, all right. While DeSantis claimed the state was not notified, the Biden administration briefed the Florida governor's office over the summer about the flights, according to a source with knowledge of the flights and confirmed by DeSantis' press secretary, Christina Pushaw. Okay, so DeSantis is lying there? Okay. It could be. I don't know. HHS, along with other administration officials, briefed the Florida governor's office in July about migrant flights to the state and shared how many unaccompanied children had been moved there, according to the source with knowledge of the flights. HHS doesn't typically share information about future flights as a matter of policy, the source said. Why not? Why did it do so in this case? Okay. Pushaw initially told CNN that the governor's office had not been briefed by anyone from the Biden administration about the flights or migrants being transported into Florida. But after CNN learned about a July briefing, Pushaw acknowledged that a call took place on July 22nd with HHS, the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, following a request from the governor's office. Oh, so the governor had to request that HHS tell him about the flights. Okay. Quote, "We were not appraised of the plans for vetting and transporting migrants after July. We requested transparency moving forward and were told flight information would be shared, but additional information was never provided," unquote, Pushaw said, adding the state law enforcement confirmed flights that occurred over recent months. Pushaw contended that, quote, "Commercial flights are not the same thing as planes chartered by the federal government, which have been observed in Jacksonville." Adding that an immigration and customs enforcement official agreed in the July meeting to share additional information with, share additional information with Florida moving forward. According to Pushaw, the governor's office also asked for more information on the screening process for individuals transported to Florida in August and did not receive information from HHS or DHS. Okay. So, CNN, can you confirm or deny any of that? Do your sources? Okay. Quote, "Due to operational security concerns, ICE does not confirm future ICE air operations until they are complete," an ICE spokesperson said in a statement. The agency said it helps transport unaccompanied minors where the Office of Refugee Resettlement, an agency under HHS, takes custody. Sounds like a lot of crossed wires taking place here, huh? Many of the flights have originated in Texas, according to the source with knowledge of the flights. Who is your source? Give them a name and a title. Give me a break. Because HHS has 2 temporary emergency intake sites in the state, at Fort Bliss and Pecos, that opened earlier this year after a record number of unaccompanied children arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border. You know, unaccompanied children arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border through our secured border. The travel logistics from those sites can be more complicated, meaning that flights might land overnight at locations like Jacksonville, the source said. Okay, so the flights would be landing in the middle of the night in some cases, and especially maybe in the 30 cases you couldn't verify. It is common for flights to arrive at several airports during the daytime and sometimes at night. Well, at least 15 times at night, right? An Office of Refugee Resettlement contractor operates the flights, according to the source. It's getting ridiculous. Okay, so anyway, DeSantis accused the Biden administration of flying in clandestine flights where they had no notification in the middle of the night, and everything he said was absolutely true. It's like they gave him a call in July and said, yeah, we're going to have some flights coming in. And then when they asked for more information, they didn't get it. And CNN's like, oh, many flights landed in the daytime. We won't tell you how many. We know 15 happened at night. There were 47 altogether. 30 we can't confirm. So 2. Anyway, that's the context for what has been going on in the past, as far as like the previous last year. And then, just the other day, DeSantis vows Florida will transport more migrants from border to other states. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Friday said he intends to use every penny of the $12 million his state budgeted to relocate migrants and set the expectation for buses and likely more flights of migrants paid for by the state. Quote, "These are just the beginning efforts," the Republican governor said. "We've got an infrastructure in place now. There's going to be a lot more that's happening," unquote. Speaking at a news conference in Daytona Beach, DeSantis defended using taxpayer dollars to send 50 migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard because he said many people who cross the border end up in Florida. He said people working for Florida are in Texas and they, quote, "profile individuals who are likely headed to Florida." Florida, he added, has hired its own contractor to coordinate the state's relocation efforts in Texas, though DeSantis did not close the door on working with Texas GOP Governor Greg Abbott to arrange future transportation. Quote, "We may collaborate," DeSantis said. If he could, DeSantis said, quote, "I would send them back to Mexico or back to the home country," unquote. Most, if not all, of the migrants on the 2 flights said they were from Venezuela. Okay. DeSantis also disputed that the migrants did not know where they were going in Massachusetts because he claimed that they had signed a waiver and were provided with a packet that included a map of Martha's Vineyard. Quote, "It's obvious that's where they were going," he said, adding, "It's all voluntary," unquote. The state budget DeSantis signed this year allocated $12 million to move, quote, "unauthorized aliens," but specified the intent was to transport people from this state. Asked about that provision, DeSantis dismissed it as semantic because so many migrants end up in Florida, but they are not moving there in groups large enough to intercept. Quote, "So we've been interdicted people on a onesie-twosie basis." We've been maybe interdicting? DeSantis said. "And we said, okay, so we've had people in Texas for months trying to figure out how are these people getting to Florida? What's the movement? And the reality is 40% of them say they want to go to Florida. And so that's a lot. I mean, we talk about all those people, but the problem is they're coming in through with like 3 people in a car, and they go through. It's hard for us to know because they're just coming into the state like any other car, so there's not a big movement," unquote. Quote, "So they've been in Texas identifying people that are trying to come to Florida and then offering them free transportation to sanctuary jurisdictions. And so they went from Texas to Florida to Martha's Vineyard in the flight," unquote. Responding to criticism on Thursday from President Joe Biden, DeSantis said, quote, "We're continuing to use every tool at our disposal to insulate the state of Florida from the negative ramifications of his reckless border policies," unquote. "He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when we had millions of people illegally pouring across the southern border," DeSantis said. Well, DeSantis said more than just that. That's only part of the quote, which I can actually provide to you in full, because I was a diligent streamer and downloaded the video. So let's take a look at that for a moment, shall we? Hopefully this doesn't get me, like, you know, copyright claimed or demonetized or something. So you guys, I haven't boosted the sound on this, so you guys tell me if you can't hear it. I'll turn off the background music just for clarity's sake.
When I heard that the president is scrambling to get his cabinet together.
Can you guys hear that? Let me know. Scrambling to get his cabinet together. While I'm focused on something else for a second, let me take care of Kieverdam's helpful GoFundMe links, which are now at the top of the chat box. If you guys can take a look at those when you have the opportunity to help out our friend Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. If you have a couple of bucks to spare, they, their friends, and family could certainly use your help, and we'll appreciate it. Volume is good, says Mike Savage. Well, hell, if Mike Savage can hear it, that's all I need to know.
To try to address the fact that you have governors who are helping to relocate illegal aliens to sanctuary cities. Now, he didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when we had millions of people illegally pouring across the southern border.
Okay, now that's the quote that CNN decided to go with. But it doesn't end there.
He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when you had 53 migrants die in some trailer in Texas because they were neglected by the federal government. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we had Americans that were victimized by criminal aliens that he led across the border. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we hit record fentanyl deaths, which that fentanyl is coming across his open border. It's only when you have 50 illegal aliens end up in a very wealthy, rich sanctuary enclave that he decides to scramble on this. And so I think what we are doing...
Okay, that's the full statement, and or at least in context of the rest of it. And I don't want to risk any copyright claims, so I'm going to kind of pause there and hope I didn't, trip any wires or anything. So, yeah. So he wasn't just talking about the people pouring across the board. He brought up plenty of other examples of situations where one would think that more needs to be done. Setting aside the number of people coming across the border, setting aside the people that have been dying coming across the border. I mean, the DeSantis only mentioned the people that died in that tractor trailer. The most recent example of that, which I covered in my last digest. But that kind of thing in small and large numbers happening all the time, as you heard from the sheriff and everybody at Eagles Point, Eagle Crest. Sorry, I apologize. Where they don't have enough room now for all the drowning victims coming across on the shores. It doesn't stop there, and you never see any kind of like bold headline action taking place on this issue. But he's got a point. All of a sudden, Ron DeSantis does the exact same thing that effectively the commander-in-chief through his administration has been doing for months, if not the last couple of years, bit by bit. And all of a sudden, now it's an issue. Oh, but Trump did it too. Okay. Well then, but here's the other thing, and I don't know if the next story will talk about it. I don't know if I got one, but DeSantis has been accused of human trafficking as a result of what he did, sending 50 voluntary illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. Human trafficking. Okay, if Trump is his own man. If Biden was sending chartered flights of undocumented children over and over again from Texas to Florida, if what DeSantis did is human trafficking, well, Joe Biden is the biggest human trafficker in the current year. But it's not human trafficking. That's not how that works. Now, people are accusing DeSantis of this, and it's hilarious, all things considered. But everybody seems to forget or doesn't want to acknowledge that, moving illegal immigrants from one state to another, yeah, it's very routine. It happens all the time. It's done by the people in the highest position, and it's still being done. But it always seems to go to places that can't handle it, don't need it. Never seems to go to the places, So anyway, let's get back to our last article. I've only got one more here. Because how could I, of all people, how could I take a look at CNN coverage of a particular event without taking a moment to visit with our favorite friend at CNN, Chris Cillizza? Because Chris Cillizza has something to say about this, and Chris may be on the right page with this. I know. I don't know, just by the headline alone, but we'll find out. Let's find out together. Ron DeSantis is getting exactly what he wanted. Okay, well, if Ron DeSantis' point was to highlight problems with the border and ridiculous policies by the Biden administration to spread the love of the problem beyond what his own choices and policies and departments can't handle, if that was what he wanted, I suppose he is. But let's see what Chris has to say about it. In the 24 hours or so since Ron DeSantis sent 2 planes carrying migrants to Martha's Vineyard, the move has dominated the political world. Every newspaper and cable channel is filled with thoughts about the move, with much of that opinion tilting toward outrage over the Florida Republican governor treating people like political pawns. Yes, treating people like pawns, like cattle. Imagine that. It's outrageous, New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez said of the move. Quote, they lure people like human traffickers lure people onto buses and unknowing where they're going to. They have no concern for... They supposedly are the advocates for human life. They have no concern for the lives of these people, unquote. Yes, how dare you send someone to Martha's Vineyard? of their own volition. How dare you? DeSantis couldn't have scripted it any better politically. The simple fact is that DeSantis made this Martha's Vineyard gambit solely to draw attention to himself and his opposition to the border policies of the Biden administration. It was, to be frank, a stunt. And it's not the first time he's done something like this. You're right, it was a stunt. And it did bring attention to his opposition to the border policies, as in the border policies that are allowing these things to occur, and illegal crossings to increase, and deaths to increase. There is more pain, misery, and illegality taking place right now under Biden. I don't know what to tell you, Chris. Are you going to at least acknowledge the problem? I guess that's my question. Let's find out. Consider, in the spring of 2022... Oh, now you're just going to list off things that DeSantis did? You're not going to talk about the actual issue that's being brought up. Okay. In the spring of 2022, DeSantis administration rejected 41% of proposed math textbooks because they were allegedly indoctrinating kids. Well, were they or weren't they? Quote, some publishers attempted to slap a coat of paint on an old house built on the foundation of Common Core and indoctrinating concepts like race essentialism, especially, bizarrely, for elementary school students, DeSantis said in a statement explaining the move. Okay, well, was he wrong? Right? Is that a stunt? Okay. At a press conference at the University of South Florida earlier this year, DeSantis scolded students for wearing masks while indoors. Quote, you do not have to wear those masks, he said. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything. We've got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous, unquote. Okay, so he stated his opinion, but he didn't make anybody do anything they didn't want to. He asked them politely to take them off, but he said if you want to wear them, it's fine. Uh-huh. The man has an opinion. So? DeSantis revoked Disney's special self-governance status in Florida following the company's criticism of the state's passage of legislation that bans the discussion of gender and sexuality amongst young people in public schools. Oh, is that what it does? Is that what that legislation was meant to do, Chris? Is that how you describe it? Okay. Quote, you're a corporation based in Burbank, California, and you're going to marshal your economic might to attack the parents of my state, said DeSantis. We view that as a provocation, and we're going to fight back against that, unquote. Was that decision under the purview of the governor or not? Does Disney have a legal right to self-governance in Florida just because they're Disney? Yeah, that's a stunt? Okay. So, Chris, so what? What does that have to do with this? What does that have to do with the border? Each of these incidents drew national headlines. Yeah, they did. And whose headlines were they, Chris? Well, that's DeSantis' fault? Okay. Each of them drew intense criticism from the left. Well, golly gee whiz. A politician on one side of the aisle does something that countermands the philosophy of the other side of the aisle, and it draws criticism. You know, there are a lot of left-leaning politicians that get criticism from the right, and a lot of left-leaning politicians that get criticism from the left and right and left. Yeah? And each of them drew equal amounts of praise from the conservative right. Well, welcome to divided politics in our country, Chris. Tell me again about how Michael Avenatti might be president of the United States someday because he said things that you liked about Trump. As in, he said things against Trump. You know, I had some high hopes for a brief moment as I started reading this article for Chris on this, but my hopes have been shattered. Which is exactly how the Martha's Vineyard stunt has played out. And you played right into it, Chris. You played right into it. Not only are you rebroadcasting the event to no end, but through this very editorial, you are showing the slant you are putting on the issue. Don't discuss the issue, DeSantis is a politician who uses the media. Says me, the media. While DeSantis was blasted by Democrats, the right ran to defend him. Quote, DeSantis was right to send migrants to Martha's Vineyard. We need to bring border crisis to Democrats. Read an op-ed on Fox's News website. And Fox News is completely biased in these things as well. But that was somebody's opinion. An op-ed, an opinion, editorial said, you say. Okay. It's just as legitimate as this, as far as truth, I suppose. For DeSantis, the outrage on both sides is the point. Yes, Chris, it's bringing attention to a problem he has with federal policy in regards to immigration. He has taken the exact same move that the federal government has done to Florida, and he's moved it somewhere else, which is what the federal government was doing. Are you going to acknowledge that? He has built a political brand on the idea of standing up to what he views as political correctness and wokeness. That has been one of his strategies, yeah. Whether you agree with it or not. Okay, but what does that have to do with the border situation, Chris? Are you going to bring up the border situation? Are you going to talk about the increases in illegal crossings during the Biden administration? Are you going to talk about the number of deaths that have increased as a result of policies and slack enforcement? Are you going to talk about how Kamala Harris was put in charge of getting down to the root causes of mass migration when she first got into office, and nothing has improved? DeSantis signed a bill into law earlier this year designed to, quote, protect Floridians from discrimination and woke indoctrination, unquote. Okay. What was that bill? What did it have to do with anything? Okay. In order to maintain and burnish that image, he has to do more outrageous things like the Martha's Vineyard move. Chris, I would be surprised. I mean, I haven't seen every one of your op-eds, but I would be surprised if prior to this you ever mentioned the flights from Texas to Florida undertaken by the Biden administration. I mean, obviously CNN reported on it, even though they tried to skew it as though it were some kind of conspiracy theory, which it wasn't. But I'd be surprised if you've ever even brought it up. Maybe you have. I don't know, but you're not citing your own article or something, which I would think you would do if you talked about this previously. Thank you, Keldrick. It's amazing how willing the media is to admit they're being used by politicians. Yeah, it's like, he's doing this for headlines. And you're giving him what he wants. I mean, you're making him a national figure. There are governors of states across this nation whose names I have absolutely no idea. You know, you could put a list of the governors of any random 10 states in front of me, and I would be surprised if I'd be able to, A, recognize a name, and B, even if I did, that I could match them to their state. But I know about Ron DeSantis. Oh boy, I know all about Ron DeSantis. I would have to strain to tell you who the previous governor before Ron DeSantis was in Florida. But I know Ron DeSantis' name. And whose fault is that? And why aren't you mentioning the Biden flights that were the exact same mechanism as what DeSantis just did? I have to ask, Chris, you talk about, being criticized by one side or the other. Yeah, there's bias there. Are you going to acknowledge anything about your own? The fact of the matter, whether you like DeSantis or not, is that his outrage machine is humming along. Okay, Chris, is there nothing to be outraged about when fentanyl, 1,800 pounds, was seized at the border, and that's only the stuff that we found? That millions of illegal immigrants are crossing into the country. Is that nothing to be outraged over? Is that nothing to be concerned about with the people who are supposed to be in charge of our border security? I mean, I don't know every position DeSantis has on every issue. I don't live in Florida. I'm doxing myself. So, Ron DeSantis' career and decisions, etc., don't really mean a lot to me on the ground, so to speak. But on this particular issue, which, by the way, I have a record on, going back at least 6 years, I kind of agree with the sentiments that something really needs to be done when you have an administration that has seen numbers like this jump up. Because whether you think it's Trump's fault or all of this is some kind of blowback from previous decisions, whatever, I hate to tell you this, the commander-in-chief is where the buck stops. They are in charge of it. I would like to know, as a citizen of this country, what is Biden's plan to quell the border crisis? He inherited it. He wanted the job. He has the job he wanted. What is his plan to quell the issue? You know, if Ron DeSantis, if this stunt of his, if that's what you want to classify it as, when he's just copying and pasting the federal government's own actions, if Ron DeSantis' stunt actually spurs some activity on this topic, I'm not going to complain. At least as long as it's effective action. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. Let's see. Largely riding his knack for stirring controversy. Boy, that's all he is to you? Okay. He has emerged by many measures as the second most popular Republican in the country, behind only Donald Trump. Gosh, imagine that. Calling out the hypocrisy, flaws, or stupidity of the administration in power ahead of potentially running to replace that person in their office. Certainly, no politician has ever done such a thing before. You already told us he's, 2024 candidate, right? Okay. He is regarded as a heavy favorite to win a second term over his Democratic opponent, former Governor Charlie Crist, in November, and he is widely regarded as the only candidate who could credibly challenge Trump in a 2024 Republican primary. You could also say, not being a mind reader, that since he is making all these decisions for Florida and drawing attention to the problems taking place in Florida, that he is effectively looking out for the welfare of his constituents in Florida, regardless of what his presidential aspirations might be. But okay. Which is somewhat ironic, because as Trump likes to remind anyone who asks, he helped make DeSantis by endorsing him in a primary fight in 2018, and DeSantis has quite clearly modeled his approach to politics off of the ripped from the headline strategy employed by Trump. Yes, a politician using the media to get their message out. What a concept. Did Harry Enton ghostwrite this for you, Chris? I really have to wonder, because this is sounding like bargain basement civics 101 here, or political science, class A. In fact, what DeSantis is offering Republican voters amounts to Trumpism without Trump. Oh, in DeSantis, you get all the anti-wokeness that Trump built a presidential campaign and presidency on, but just without some of the more embarrassing political foibles and tics that the former president brings with him. So DeSantis has the philosophy that one Trump the White House, but absent the non-politic behaviors, you say. Huh. What a terrible sales pitch. And just like Trump, covering DeSantis provides a significant challenge for the media as well. Does it? How so? DeSantis wants, and even courts, the scorn of the mainstream media for gambits like the one in Martha's Vineyard. Yeah, he knows exactly how you think, and you're playing right into his hand. Whatever you think about his politics, if he was a Democratic governor and doing the same thing, and getting the right-wing media to scream about him, it'd be playing into his hands. Because, you see, Chris, I don't know if you're aware of this, but right now, and for the last several years, it has been blatantly obvious of the political bias in certain news outlets over others and vice versa. One championing one side of the aisle and one dedicated to opposing that side of the aisle. It doesn't matter who we're talking about, whether CNN or Fox or MSNBC or Breitbart, whatever. Okay? And so, Chris, I don't know if you know this, but if you can get all of the newspapers talking about you and mentioning your name, either those that generally support your side or those that are against your side, you are advertising to all of the potential constituents. Because, Chris, you might not know this, but there may indeed be some swing voters or even some Democrats who are not happy about the situation at the border. And so if they see someone like DeSantis underlining that problem, he might be able to bring them onto his side, either for re-election to his current office or election to an aspirational presidential campaign. I don't know if you realize this, Chris. I don't know if you know this. I hate to be the bearer of obvious facts to you. Editor at large at CNN. He knows that the more negative attention he gets, the better liked he is among the Republican base, and the more money he can raise for his future political endeavors. Wow, Chris. Like that one Lords of the Night episode, which is a watermark, not a watermark, a watershed. A benchmark, watermark, there you go, episode of Lords of the Night where we had Sinatra Says on, and I read the worst article I have ever read on Lords of the Night. You can actually look that up on my channel. Just look up in the Lords of the Night playlist, worst article. And it'll be an episode with Sinatra Says where I read the worst article I'd ever read at that point from Chris Eliz's personal Igor, Harry Enton, and how just absolutely bald-faced basic the information provided in that article was. And Sinatra made a very good point. He said, this article is written for people that don't know anything about politics. And certainly, there are people out there who don't concern themselves with politics or, the basic machinations of fundraising and media play and all that kind of thing. So he's right on that score. But here's the thing. On that point, which is fair to Sinatra, I have to come to only two conclusions about that statement by Chris Cillizza just then. Either Chris Cillizza thinks that very basic information about how politics works and fundraising and media play with politicians works. Either he thinks that's something revelatory, or he knows that the caliber of his audience just has no idea what's going on. And I guess that's also possible. You have to inform. You're right to inform. If you didn't think that, if you couldn't think why DeSantis would be doing this, then maybe you have to have it explained to you. Okay, I guess I'll concede. Still feels like I'm being talked down to. Not covering someone like DeSantis, the governor of a major state and someone with national ambitions, is out of the question. You're right, Chris. You have no choice. You have no choice. But how DeSantis and his stunts are covered is something that the media needs to think seriously on as we move closer to 2024. Well, how would you advise they cover it differently? Let's, Chris, I know I'm asking rhetorically, let's say this story came out during the campaign season. Let's say he did this during his presidential run. How would you cover it differently? How would you advise the media cover it? What is the correct, healthier way to cover this story? Aside from mischaracterizing what's going on, ignoring actions taken by the federal government previous to this, and also listing off other things that DeSantis has done as governor that have nothing to do with the issue of border security and immigration. I would love to know, for my own edification if no one else's, what Chris Cillizza's advice would be to the media writ large on how to handle DeSantis now and in the future. Oh well, there's our favorite friend at CNN, Chris Cillizza. So, I'm going to take a few minutes to check in with you guys because I get so wrapped up in the articles. Okay, I did this last time, and I got it right the first time, and I'm going to mess it up the second time, right? Bichi Kogido. Or... Because like I was trying to learn Spanish not too long ago and pronounce bicycle, and it's bicicleta, right? Bicicleta. So I want to say BC. Was it BC or Beachy? I should remember this. I don't. I apologize. Scribelight, enjoyed listening to your stream with your sister. I admire the relationship between you two. Yeah, my sister and I feel very fortunate to have the relationship I do with my sister. Growing up, we're only a year apart. And growing up, we didn't have a contentious relationship or anything, but we didn't, you know, our likes and dislikes and our interests never really overlapped all that much, and we kind of kept to ourselves. It wasn't until she got out of college and needed a place to stay, because by then my parents had retired, moved far away, and so she needed a place to stay while she got herself on her feet, and so she came to stay with me, and I'd been living in my apartment at that point for a couple of years. And so... yeah, over time and over several, let's just say, tumultuous events in either of our lives, we came to rely on one another a lot more than I think either of us had imagined, and came to appreciate and admire each other. Well, at least I know that I admire her. I can't speak for her. I think she likes me. I think so. She might even be listening now. She's probably not. If she suddenly calls, I'll bring her on. But yeah, but no, as compared to a lot of relationships between siblings that I hear about from other people that I know, or either personally or sidewise, yeah, I'm very lucky to have her in my corner, so to speak, and I hope she knows that I'm in hers whenever she needs it. So there you go. Gen T Maxi, Canada now has a skinny Trump running for office too. Everyone they don't like is a Trump. Yeah. That's going to just become like you know, putting gate at the end of every scandal, you know, Comics Gate or Gamergate or whatever. Calling someone a Trump is now just going to be a slur. Trumpism. They're promoting Trumpism. You don't have to actually interrogate what it is they're doing. It's just shorthand for that's the person not to like. You know, just one more way to avoid actually thinking critically about anything. Okay, here we go. Beachy Cogito. Beachy Cogito. I apologize. I need to find that sound. There's a whole bunch of sound effects I want to get. One is applause. I don't have applause. One is the guy moaning "I apologize" from I think the second or third season of Deadwood, which is a great just I apologize. I apologize. I'll try. Practice will make perfect. Or at least marginally better. Dax Orion, Jen, I accidentally burned myself alive while petting my cat in 7 days, 10 minutes ago. I blame you. How fast were you petting your cat? Or is that a euphemism? I'll just leave that there. Bubba Hotep. Fact check, did Biden secretly transport illegals? False. While they did transport illegals secretly, they did not secretary transport them. You mean secretly transport them? A paraphrase of fact. Yeah, I there was a what was it? There was a was it a PolitiFact article or something where someone asked this question, like, did Biden covertly fly immigrants from Texas to Florida at night or whatever? And their answer was mostly false. And then in the actual article itself, it said, while Biden did do like the entire thing was true. The entire allegation was absolutely true, and so they called it mostly false. I wish I had that in front of me. I don't. I just saw it on Twitter the other day, and it got by me. But there you go. And Beachy was an hour late into this. Sorry. You don't have to apologize. Hey. You know, these things are here purportedly for posterity, unless or until my channel is zapped by YouTube for some reason. So hopefully now or in the future you can look back on this and revel in where things were at the tail end of 2022, because I'll be coming back to this subject again in 3 or 4 months to see where things are at then. But with that, guys, I'm going to call that here. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this informative and or entertaining. I call it infotainment. I came up with that all by myself. I'm doing my own fact-checking. If you'd like to hear more from me, well, here's the thing about next week. Next week, Wednesday and Thursday, I am scheduled, presently, for jury duty. And this jury duty is going to play all sorts of havoc with my schedule. It is possible, because I have to call in Tuesday afternoon or something to double-check before I actually show up Wednesday morning, as to whether or not I will be needed. So it may be the case of much ado about nothing. If I call on Tuesday night and they say they don't need me, then Wednesday and Thursday will hopefully proceed per normal. However, and I'll let you guys know on Twitter, so follow me on Twitter, it is entirely possible that I might not have my regularly scheduled TEDx on Thursday night. I don't know. I certainly will not have my regular She-Hulk review Thursday morning. I'll probably have to do that Friday, perhaps. So that's this upcoming week, which is out of the ordinary. But if it were any other week, and for anyone listening in the future for my schedule, my usual schedule is Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. I do TED Excellence, where I take a look at an off-brand TED Talk. And then on Sundays, as this show is, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, for whatever subject I happen to choose for a Sunday stream. And anything in between that I might choose to do otherwise. Anyway, that's the upcoming schedule. But always follow me on Twitter, because it is entirely possible, and I've done this before, where something will just get caught in my brain, and I just feel like I have to say something about it or do a video on it, and I might just do an impromptu stream at some point. So if you want to be there for that, follow me on Twitter. I always post these things on Twitter. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I don't say that enough on here. It's probably self-detrimental. But likes help the algorithm, sharing lets people know I exist, and subscribing lets me know you subscribed, if you make that visible to other people. So there you go. But all that as an outro, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this Border News Digest number 2. Number 3 will happen in a month or two, maybe. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Those who donated, either to myself or to the GoFundMe's pinned to the top of the chat box. So friendly Lily, provided by Heaverdam. Thank you so much for your generosity. We all really appreciate it. But with that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your beautiful Sunday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.